buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. It is the short week after the long holiday weekend. It is the Michael Dukes Show. And hi, how are you? You ready to go? Man, does this mean a fall is officially in full swing? I'm not sure. I'm trying to. If so, who took my summer, man? Who took my summer? It was right there. Then it was gone like that. Oh, it's insane. Anyway, welcome back to the program, and thanks for coming and joining us. I hope you had a great weekend. I hope you got a lot of stuff done. I had so many plans, and yet they just didn't seem to all come to fruition as much as I'd wanted, but it's a whole nother story. It's a whole nother show. That's okay. It's okay. I feel pretty good, rejuvenated, ready to go. And today is the day we get to start with a bang. Today we start off things fresh with a bang. We're going to be doing the weekly top three. Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets is waiting patiently in the wings. Stop chewing on your hand. No, he's waiting patiently in the wings out there doing his thing, ready to go. And we're going to be talking about three big topics today. We're going to dive into that here in just a hot second. And then, of course, in hour two, Chris Story will be joining us, and we'll be talking with him about some positivity, some positive stuff. He's going to be a little early today because he had other things to go on. So we're going to have him be taking him in the second segment of hour two today. And that will be, that will be, it'll be good. It'll be good. It'll be good. All right, so that's what's going on. So without further ado, I guess we just dive right into this with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and we're going to kick things off right now. Let's bring Brad Keithley on board and see where he's at in the world. Good morning, Brad. How are you?
Michael, I'm doing great today. There's a reason that you have these segments on Tuesday, isn't it? So you can sort of ease into the week on Monday, and then by Tuesday you're sort of ready for it. But
because you really got to brace. Yeah, you got to brace yourself for that Tuesday, and then when the Monday's off, you're like, oh, no, it's all good. It's Truth Tuesdays, Brad. What are you going to do? I mean, if we can't handle the truth, nobody can handle the truth, I guess, is what it's all about. And you picked some doozies for us today. We got some good stuff going on. Let's get started. I want to talk a little bit here about the sycophants in oil, in the oil candidates. And I will just say this. I find it amazing that in a state that is mostly, well, it's reddish purple, but there are more registered Republicans and everything. I still find it amazing to me that more Republicans seem to be calling for government to step in to take care of things than I would have. If you'd told me 10 years ago that was the choice, I would have been like, what? That's not going to couldn't possibly happen. And yet here we are this morning. Give us the rundown.
Well, we're certainly going to get to that in segment 3 when we talk about Cook Inlet, about people talking about government stepping in. But in segment 1, I want to talk about oil taxes a little bit. We talked about this at the end of last week's show. Joe Shearhorn and Jim Jansen had written a letter to the editor that showed up about oil taxes, and I talked about that a little bit. Later in the week, they went full blown with a column that the title of which is "Fair and Competitive Oil Taxes Are Working." And one of the sentences down in this one of the paragraphs said, oil production forecast numbers are way up. North Slope oil production is expected to exceed 630,000 barrels per day by the end of the decade, up from 442,000 barrels on August 15th. By the year 2032, the industry is on pace to produce more barrels of oil per day than any time in the past 20 years. This is the key sentence. That will mean more revenue for the state, more jobs, and a stronger Alaska economy. That's a lie. As we've talked about on the show repeatedly since the spring revenue forecast has come out, it shows this dramatic increase in production going on, but it shows oil revenues staying flat, and even for those two segments of oil revenues, production taxes and royalties that are most closely tied to production levels, it shows revenues going down over that period. The only reason oil revenues in total go up is because the petroleum corporate income tax raises it back up above the break-even level by a slight amount. But it doesn't mean that the implication of this paragraph, this will mean more revenue for the state. That's just wrong. I mean, the spring revenue, all you have to do is look at the spring revenue forecast, and you know that's wrong. But even if that were true, that's not the standard. Every sentence about oil taxes should begin with reciting this sentence from the Alaska Constitution. Article 8, Section 2, the legislature shall provide for the utilization, development, and conservation of all natural resources belonging to the state, including land and waters, for the maximum benefit of the people. Every article about oil taxes, every comment about oil taxes should start with that sentence. And so the question isn't, are revenues up or revenues down? They're in fact down when you look at the ones that are tied to production levels. But the question isn't, are revenues up or revenues down? The question is, are we receiving the maximum benefit from oil for the people? And the answer is, by every measure that I've looked at, we're about $400 to $500 million short of the revenue maximization level, the level of revenues that we could get before the state could get before the revenues started to eat away at the incentives for oil companies and production levels started down. That $400 to $500 million is in play. And what's going on is it's going to the oil companies right now, instead of go as extra profits, if you will, compared to the profits that are established by the Alaska Constitution. It's going to the oil companies instead of Alaskans, and that's just wrong. What's very troubling about this is you see this sort of comment now showing up in candidate statements. Walter Featherly, a candidate who's running against so-called independent candidate running against Julie Colomb. We've already talked about Walter Featherly on the show. We'll talk about him again in the third segment. He's advocated that ADA come in and take over the Cook Inlet oil fields or Cook Inlet gas fields to make them to essentially nationalize the Cook Inlet gas fields, to take them over and produce gas for Alaskans. That's a problem. But here's Featherly's comment on the Jansen and Sherhorn piece. Jim Jansen and Joe Sherhorn have it right. Alaska's oil and gas industry operates in an extreme, remote, and undeveloped environment, making the costs and risks among the highest in the world. Alaska depends both fiscally and to heat and power our state on a thriving oil and gas industry. Increasing their costs and risks by adding to their tax burden makes no sense. My opponent, Julie Colomb, supports policies such as, get this, mega PFDs. I've never seen Julie Colomb support a mega PFD in my life. That will add to the calls for increased taxes. I am proud to have the support of both Jim Jansen and Joe Sherhorn in this critical election. Nothing in that statement begins or even reflects anything out of Article 8, Section 2 of the Constitution, talking about maximum benefit, of using the resources for the maximum benefit of its people. It just talks about the oil industry. We need to make sure we bend over backwards for the oil industry because they got it tough up here, and we need to make sure that they get what they need. Well, I don't disagree with that, but the state also should get what the Constitution provides the state should get, and there's a way of melding the two. And that melding is sort of coming from the right and from the left, has this $400 to $500 million in the middle, and Shearhorn and Jansen and Featherly are all saying, "Oh, just keep that with the oil companies." Well, that's not right. That's not what should happen with it. It should come to the state. It's almost, Michael, as if these guys have become so focused on being pro-business and pro-oil, they've forgotten to be pro-Alaskan. They have gone over to the other side, if you will, and said, we've got to bend over backwards for the oil industry, and let's not, let's minimize, or let's just not mention Article 8, Section 2 of the Constitution and the obligations there. It is good to be pro-business. It is good to be pro-oil, but it's also good to be pro-Alaskan. And I think, and it's also important to be pro-Alaskan. And I think what's happening is they're bending so far backwards, trying to be pro-business and pro-oil that they're missing the part about being pro-Alaskan. So it's troubling to see the misrepresentation in Shearhorn and Jansen's piece about what revenues are doing, but it's especially troubling now to see candidates picking up that mantra and becoming sycophants to the oil industry by saying, let's just make sure the oil industry is happy. Let's not worry about our obligations under Article 8, Section 2.
What's interesting is that I've seen many arguments and discussions about Article 8, Section 2. And in fact, it was interesting because one year we were having a big discussion about it on the show, and it was a continuing, reoccurring theme coming back to that segment over and over, that section over and over and over. And I literally had politicians at the time arguing about what maximum benefit of the people meant. And many of them said, well, that means the maximum revenues to the state. That's what it means. Which, is not how I read it, and it's not how most people read it, because they said as long as the state receives the revenue, that's the maximum benefit to the people. But even in that case, it doesn't hold true here, because we're not getting more revenue. We have a finite resource that once you draw it out of the ground, it's not coming back, and we're not getting, essentially all that we could out of it, which is what the mandate is. They're supposed to be the purveyors and the folks who are in charge of all that, and yet they seem to think it's all okay. And in fact, they'll willingly tell lies that's insane.
Yeah, the standard. I mean, what we've got is we've gotten caught up in, as a lot of time happens in politics here. We've gotten caught up in this extremes, right? Some people say we got to go back to SB 21, or I'm sorry, go back to ACES. That's where we need to take revenues. Well, ACES proved that it wasn't working. ACES proved that it wasn't attracting the investment necessary to maximize the benefit of our resources, because we weren't having investment in the ground to develop those resources. Now other people are saying, well, SB 20 or SB 21, we've got to stick on SB 21. Well, the problem is, as it enters its second decade, as we've talked on the show before, and as I've written about in the column, as it enters its second decade, SB 21 is showing some problems. It's showing that under the circumstances that we're coming into in the next decade, it doesn't work to maximize the benefit of the resource for the benefit of Alaskans. It's giving too much of the revenue over to the oil companies. We need to find the place. We can find the place. We know where that place is, sort of between those two. That's not ACES, that doesn't go to the extreme of ACES, but that fixes SB 21 to reflect that Alaskans do get a share of the revenues, of the additional revenues that are being generated by the additional volumes that are being produced. You can look at the percentage take from oil pre-ACES, ACES, SB 21, and currently. And what's happening is ACES was an all-time high. It took something like 30% of the gross revenue. SB 21 brought it back down to the high teens. What's happening in this decade under SB 21, the way it's operating as it creaks on, is we're coming down to like 14% of the revenues. We're not achieving the constitutional obligation of maximizing the benefit to Alaskans. We need to go after that. And things like these comments from Shearhorn, the lies from Shearhorn and Jansen about about increased revenues, and the sycophant adoption of those lies by candidates like Featherly that says, "Oh, I side with the oil industry over Alaska." I mean, that's just galling.
All right. We're going to move over to number 2 here in just a second. Brad Keithley is our guest. The weekly top 3 continues. Buckle up, Buttercup. It just gets better from here. We got more coming up with Truth Tuesdays. We're back in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Brad Keithley is our guest. The weekly top 3 continues. I'm looking over here at something that I should have been looking at. Here we go. Okay. All right. We are continuing right now. Donna says something interesting. She said, we don't know actually that raising taxes on oil won't result in less money for government. ACES showed us that it can result in less money for government. But I think the point here is that it's not the end all be all. There's more choices than just going straight back to ACES. And I think that's the argument here is, if we're leaving money on the table, this is what we need to be talking about. And of course, they obviously don't want to talk about it. They'll spend millions of dollars trying to prevent us from talking about it because it will save them millions more, which I guess to protect their shareholders, that's what they're supposed to do. But at the same time, as the trustees of the resource, our legislature should be all in for us. I mean, the executives and the agencies and the trade associations, they're all in for their people. Our legislators should be all in for us.
Yep, exactly right, Michael. And it's not, I mean, this is not, you can't calculate these things to an absolute mathematical certainty, but you can study decline curves and prices and revenue and production levels, and you can get a feel for what the revenue maximization point is with respect to oil. And we're well below it. I mean, I've written about it now in 4 or 5 columns in the landmine, and I've looked at it closely in connection with all the ongoing stuff we do with respect to oil, and we're running below it. Now, does it benefit the oil companies? Sure, it does. Do the oil companies like it? Sure, they do. Does it help promote investment here because they're getting supra returns? They're getting returns over the revenue maximization level. Yeah, no doubt about it. But that's not the balance that the Constitution says we ought to strike. The balance that the Constitution says we ought to strike is providing for the utilization, development, and conservation of all natural resources belonging to the state for the maximum benefit of its people. And that's the balance that the Constitution tells us to strike. And when you have legislative candidates like Featherly, who are out there that don't even mention that sentence, don't even mention that balance, don't even mention on the one hand, on the other hand, let's find what lands in the middle. Don't even do that. That's very concerning, because you have candidates who essentially are saying, yeah, I know what the Alaska Constitution, or maybe they don't. I know what the Alaska Constitution says, but we need to bend over backwards for oil here. I mean, Sherhorn and Jansen have had this long history of defending, the oil industry. They were in on SB 21. They've been in on the defense of SB 21 since it was passed. Fine. SB 21 was important at the time because it got us rebalanced with where we were under ACES. But now, as we're entering the second decade of SB 21, we are seeing problems show up. Like anything that runs 10 years, you're seeing problems show up in it. And you need to fix those problems so that this balance required by the Constitution is achieved. Featherly's comment, there's one other thing about Featherly's comment that just irritates the heck out of me. It says, he goes on to the defense of SB 21. Then he says, my opponent, Julie Colomb, supports policies such as mega PFDs. And what Featherly is saying, we shouldn't worry about mega PFDs. We should worry about bending over backwards for the oil industry. Well, that's we should worry about both. We should worry about making sure the industry has the incentives it needs to develop the resources, which is important to us to get those resources developed. But we should also ensure that it's done under fiscal provisions that ensure that Alaskans get their fair share and that ensure that PFDs, for example, get their fair share. We shouldn't be saying, oh, mega PFD is bad, oil good. We should be saying, how do we find the way that maximizes the benefit for Alaskans? Part of which is to have an incentive for the industry to continue to develop.
Absolutely. Ron says, what percentage do the mines pay in the state? Ron, that's a whole nother story, but we could do a whole show on mineral reserves. That's a whole nother story. That's the same kind of thing, though. All right, here we go. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Let's do it.
Brad Keithley joins us every week to discuss oil, gas, and the economic forecast of Alaska. It's the Michael Dukes Show.
All right, Brad Keithley continues with us, the weekly top three. We're continuing on here. Let's go on to number 2. Let's talk about the inconsistency of some of Alaska's more progressive candidates. Brad, what are you talking about there?
You accuse me, Michael, sometimes of getting into these Twitter fights or Facebook fights, and I do. But I do them because I learned something from them. I mean, I challenge somebody's statement and have an exchange with them that helps me better understand what the position is. We had somebody on Twitter who posted and said, Alaska needs to be more progressive. We need to do all these things. We need to fund K through 12 better. We need to do this. We need to do that. And my response was, I'm genuinely curious, what does progressive mean in this state, especially since so many so-called progressives support funding government using the most regressive tax ever proposed. And then I got an answer that listed the progressive objectives: proper government managed, feeding starving Alaskans, not privatizing education, growing the core of the permanent fund, getting federal dollars, giving SOA, state of Alaska employees retirement security, properly taxing extraction resources, the maximum benefit for Alaskans. The opposite of the GOP. Most of those things are on the spending side. Most of those things are, we need to spend more on K through 12. We need to grow. We need to ensure that there's retirement security for state of Alaska employees. We need to spend more dollars to match the federal dollars on DOT. Most of those things are on the spending side, and that's how progressives in this state, by and large, define themselves, on the spending side. But there's a huge internal inconsistency in what they're doing. A lot of them, Andy Josephson, Zach Field, Matt Clayman, a lot of them say we need to grow on the spending side and we need to fund that growth by cutting the PFD. The PFD is the most regressive tax, according to Matt Berman, ICER professor, the most regressive tax ever proposed, not ever implemented, ever proposed. Most regressive. So what's going on is they're defining all these programs on the spending side, they say are progressive and will help Alaskan families out. At the same time, they're funding those by taking money out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaskans, increasing poverty levels. What Matt Berman has told us through his research is when you use PFD cuts to fund government, you're increasing the poverty levels. So if you're so concerned about starving Alaskans, why are you taking money out of the pockets of the Alaskans that are starving? Why are you increasing the number of Alaskans that are starving by increasing poverty levels, by taking money out of their pockets? The inconsistency is just sort of stark when they talk about all these spending programs they want to do, but then Zach Fields, Andy Josephson, then they step back and say, "Oh, we need to do it out of PFD cuts because huge PFDs, we need to cut those down." they're taking them. I don't really care about what happens to the top 20%, but they're taking them out of the pockets. They're taking those PFD. 80% of Alaska families fall in middle and lower income brackets. They're taking the money out of the pockets of the very people they say they're protecting. So it's not, they're not really protecting who they say they're protecting. They're
Yeah,
injuring,
no.
they're injuring the people they say they're protecting. They're doing something else.
Well, I think Senator Rob Myers of the chat room says progressive means bigger government, not best for the people. Progressives hate the PFD because it gives power back to the people instead of the government. And he's right. I mean, they can decide how it's best to spend that money. They can have the most direct impact on their family when the money comes straight to them, and they can decide how to spend it. When it takes it out of the hands of politicians who are going to decide how it's best for you to live your life or spend your money, they hate that. And you were pretty kind on the way that this person responded to you, feeding starving Alaskans. That's proper government management, like feeding starving Alaskans, not privatizing ed, growing the core of the permanent fund, getting more state dollars, giving the state of Alaska retirement security. I mean, it just sounds like we're so bad at all this stuff. And if we were just smart, we'd get on board with this.
Yeah, but even, I mean, just take that at face value. Even at face value, that's what they say. That's what they say their objective is. Just take that at face value. The way they're funding it is undoing all of those objectives. They say they're doing it to benefit working Alaska families. They say they're doing it to benefit low-income Alaska families, to give them a safety net. But the way they're funding it is undoing it immediately. It's like this circle. It's like, I'm giving you with the right hand, but I'm going to take it right back with the left hand. And so you end up net in the same place. They feel better because they say that they're doing these things, but the net effect of taking that of the way they're funding it is taking money out from underneath the very families they say they're protecting. So that internal inconsistency. I mean, the first segment was about bashing, some people for the internal inconsistency of saying I'm protecting the Alaskans by protecting the oil industry. That's wrong. And now we've got this other segment of the political spectrum saying I'm defending Alaskans by taking money out of the pockets of the very people I say, I'm trying to improve their lives. We people aren't thinking through. Well, maybe they are and they're just ignoring it. But people aren't thinking through the consequences of the positions they're taking. They're undoing the very constituencies that they say they're there to protect.
Well, and part of the problem here is that it's we're here to save people who are on the raggedy edge and who can't feed themselves and everything else. So let's make a whole new class of people who can't feed themselves or anything else by taking this money. And now we've just bolstered our argument, and now we have even more. And now, I mean, this is my argument, is that it's on purpose, because even now we've got even more people who then need more money. So we have to take more to feed them. And it's this progressive doom loop of we're going to create a larger and larger dependency state, and therefore we'll justify taking all the monies and running it because we know what's best for you.
And some of the candidates come back and say, well, what do you want us to do? I mean, we've got to fund these somehow. Well, fund them, propose funding them in a way that's consistent with what your objective is. You say you want to protect middle and lower income Alaska families. You say you want to protect working Alaska families. Well, fund it in a way that's consistent with that. Go after the $400 to $500 million in oil that we're not getting. Go after do a broad-based tax that would include non-residents and get them to contribute the 10% that they're not contributing currently. That would reduce the tax levels on the tax imposition on all Alaskans by getting non-residents to do part of that. And the response usually is, oh, that's too hard. We can't accomplish that. I mean, it was sort of like Jesse Keel, sort of like your conversation with Jesse Keel about the PFD. Well, I can't get those revenues the other way, so I'm just going to continue taking them out of the PFD through PFD cuts. I'm going to continue taking them out of middle and lower income Alaska families. The objective is to spend the money, and I really don't care where the money comes from. Yeah, it'd be nice to get it other ways, but I'm not going to say that's part of my program. I'm just going to get the money however I can, even if I'm hurting the very people that I say I'm trying to defend. Be consistent. All I'm asking is be consistent across the board. You're trying to help this segment of people on the spending side, then don't, bash them on the revenue side. Be consistent on both the spending and revenue side and see how that plays out. See how people accept it. See what the top 20% does when, you're going to have to pay part of this.
Right. Yeah, and then the shoe's on the other foot, and then they're like, whoa, wait a second. Maybe we don't need quite everything that we suggested. But in the meanwhile, you're creating your own dependency state. And again, that progressive doom loop of, we'll take more because we've got to feed the people, and we've created more people to feed by taking more. And that means we have to take more to feed the more people. And it's just, it's madness. It really, really is. And it is an example of the politician's disease of we know better than you how this money should be spent. When we know from, years and years and years of looking where money goes when it goes into private hands versus public hands, we know it will turn more times in the economy if it goes straight to the people. But as Rob pointed out, that means a loss of control, and they just can't have that. Progressives, even Republicans, but progressives especially, they don't want a loss of control as to how that money's spent. They have the better ideas.
Yeah, I have a little bit of different view on that than Rob. They don't. It's loss of control, but I think it's also going back to something Scott Kendall said a long time ago. It's also they don't want to put the funding for their programs up before the top 20%. They don't want the top 20% to have to consider whether they're going to fund those programs because they know the answer is going to be no. So they prefer. They've Alaska is unique in that we have the permanent fund dividend. You're able to target your tax on middle and lower income Alaska families. They prefer going that direction because the priority is to spend. We don't really care about how we raise the money. Priority is to spend. They prefer going that direction than going a broad-based direction that would create a role for the top 20% in pushing back on it. They don't want that to happen.
It's, this is the problem with Alaska, and we're talking about progressives, but as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of Republicans. That's why it's so hard these days, Brad, to really have a label and stick with it, because it used to be, you had the D's and the R's, and then you had the conservatives and the progressives and everything else. But really what it comes down to is bigger government. Do you support bigger, more stronger, more centralized government, or do you a smaller, more manageable, decentralized, more individualist type government? And that's really those are really what the labels should be these days.
Yeah, I agree, Michael. And the PFD is a good place to find that, to find those differences. Those that support PFDs actually support a smaller government, more money in the hands of citizens. Those that talk about, like Featherly does, a mega PFD, or the progressive that I engaged with on Twitter that sort of ignores where the revenues are coming from. They just want a bigger government. That the priority is a bigger government, more government spend. They don't really care where the revenues come from, and they don't really care who the revenues they're raising impact, even if it's the people that they say are their priority.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Now we're going to get to the topic that I wanted to start with. I jumped the gun on Brad there. We're going to talk a little bit about gas production and how it doesn't really seem to matter. Again, I think that the labels don't work. I think it goes back to bigger government, again, more centralized, bigger government control versus subsidies versus smaller, more limited government. And I think that's really how we should be looking at this here. We got more moving forward. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We'll continue. Weekly top 3 continues. Number 3, dead ahead, right here.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. I think Donna pulled one from the Wayback Machine. Reagan said, government's method of dealing with the economy, if it's not moving, incentivize it. If it moves too fast, regulate it. If it slows down, subsidize it. I mean, that's, and that's kind of where we're at right now. I mean, again, every time we look at this, it's like government's got to be involved in some way, some form, somehow. And this, again, I think comes back. This is not really Brad's purview, but I think it comes back to we've had now multiple generations of people going to the indoctrination centers of the public schools saying government is the solution to every problem. I mean, it doesn't matter what the problem is. Government is the solution, period. Full stop. And we've gotten to that point now where you see it. You see people talking to, man on the street interviews where people are just like, well, that's the government should be taking care of everything, shouldn't they? I mean, they don't understand why they don't have any money, why they can't afford a house, why they can't put retirement away. They don't understand any of that, but they think government should be taking care of everything. And they realize if they had all that money back from the government, they may be able to take care of themselves a little bit better. Brad?
Yeah, exactly right, Michael. But this goes a step further than that. I mean, what's really going on in Alaska is unique in that debate, because what's going on in Alaska is the progressives are saying we need more government, we need a bigger government, we need a bigger government role, we need more government spending on K through 12. But they're taking it out of the pockets of the very people they claim to be protecting. There's not even an effort to do it on a broad-based basis. There's not even an effort, frankly, to do it on a trying to go get the additional $400 to $500 million from the oil industry and holding on the additional spending until they do that. The additional spending is so important to them that they're willing to cut their own people. They're willing to take it out of the pockets of the people that they're claiming to protect, out of middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts. They're willing to create a system where they're increasing the number of people in poverty, increasing the number of people that are being adversely affected, increasing the number that they claim they're concerned about. They're doing it themselves through the revenue measure that they're proposing. So it's not just the sort of the usual progressives, we need bigger government, versus conservatives, we need smaller government. Progressives, we need to develop more money, or we need to raise more revenue. Conservatives, you need to leave more money in the pockets of citizens. This is the revenue measure they're using is targeted. You can't ignore that fact. It's targeted on the very working families, the very middle and lower income Alaska families that they say they're protecting. So to me, Alaska progressives are going a step beyond the old debate of bigger government or smaller government. Alaska progressives are saying, basically, Andy Josephson, Zach Fields, Alaska progressives are saying bigger government, even if it hurts middle and lower working Alaska families, even if it hurts them, we need bigger government, even if it hurts the very people that we claim we're trying to protect. So there's something about Alaska progressives that is even more disingenuous, even more internally inconsistent than your normal run-of-the-mill progressive.
Jeffrey Coggill says, lords and serfs is the end game. I mean, I've talked about the legislature and being the nouveau riche nobility. I've talked about that. Congress being the nouveau riche nobility. We see many of them go to Congress with barely a six-figure, personal worth, and then within just a few years, they're all multimillionaires. I mean, this is exactly where we're at in all this, because again, they know better than you. That's what it all comes down.
Well, and again, in Alaska, it is more so than, the legislature, by voting them the salary increase, they voted themselves, put all of them in the top 20%. All of the legislators are now in the top 20%. They voted themselves out of the bracket that gets affected by the revenue measures they're using. They've put themselves above and beyond that. So, yeah, they are the nouveau riche because they voted themselves the salary increase that puts them in that bracket.
Rob says, we've had huge amount of monies for so long that we could have bigger government with no taxes, keeping both sides happy. Then conservatives figured out that they could make money from that bigger government using the permanent fund, like Congress using debt, in an attempt to keep the broken model going. That's the thing. We're continuing to try and live high on the hog like we did for so long, and nobody's willing to feel the pain. That's the thing. We're either going to get sick from the cure or we're going to die from the disease, and nobody seems like they're willing to get sick from the cure. There's going to be pain points if you have to pull that back, and nobody seems to be willing to do that. It's just
they're willing to impose that pain on middle and lower income Alaska families.
True.
They're willing to target that pain
Yeah.
on middle and lower income Alaska families
because it's
the
proven
very
that
ones they say they're protecting.
Yeah, because it's proven that they won't squawk. Right? They're not going to squawk big enough. They don't want to face the pain of having to face that top 20 percentile who would be like, whoa, we can't pay for that. Are you, we can't. All right. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Yeah, buddy. Welcome back to it, the Michael Duke Show, Tuesday edition of the show. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, comes in for the weekly top three in our Tooth Tuesday segment. Down to the last segment this morning, Brad. I'm amazed at how many people who supposedly run for the platform of smaller, more limited government are advocating for more government intervention in the free market because we just can't make it, and we need to do it, and if we're not, we're derelict in our duty, and all this. I mean, give me the rundown here on this gas thing and the subsidies.
So Nat Hertz wrote an article for his new journal, the Northern Journal, that gets picked up by various publications around the state. The headline in that article in the ADN was "Small Cook Inlet producers say they need state government help before drilling for new natural gas." All right, let's think about this for a moment. We now know for sure that we're moving toward LNG as our marginal source of gas supply. We've had enough statements from Chugach, from NSTAR, from the partner that they're working with to develop an LNG capability that we know we're moving toward LNG. Everybody, I think wrongly, but everybody says LNG is much more expensive. We want to avoid that LNG because it's much more expensive. All right, so Cook Inlet producers have gas they say they can develop. We know the marginal source of supply is going to be LNG. So Cook Inlet producers ought to be able to command a price that's equal to the LNG price, less a penny, to keep us from going to that marginal source of supply, to supply the Cook Inlet supplies. They ought to be able to command a price that's that price, less a penny or less a nickel or not much. I mean, they probably could get away with just charging the same price as LNG. But they're saying in the face of that, that they still need government help. Small Cook Inlet producers say they need state government help before drilling for new natural gas. What they're essentially saying is we're not competitive with imported LNG. We know we ought to be able to get a price equal to LNG or a price equal to LNG less a penny. We know that that's our competitive target. And we know people say that LNG is so expensive. So we ought to be able to get a so expensive price less a penny. That ought to be what we could achieve with a new contract for supply. But that's not good enough. We still need additional government interference. We still need additional government incentives in order to produce. What they're telling us is that Cook Inlet supplies, the marginal Cook Inlet source of supply, the marginal source of supply that could be added out there is more expensive than LNG. If they still need government subsidies to bring that supply on when we know they could get the LNG imported price less a penny, if they still need government subsidies, what we know is Cook Inlet supplies are more expensive than LNG. And they want the state government, ultimately through PFD cuts, because that's where the marginal source of revenue comes from currently. They want state government, they want middle and lower income Alaska families through bearing additional PFD cuts to pay for it. we don't need to be subsidizing producers in this state, oil and gas producers in this state. It's great if they can sell it at what the LNG price is for, and we get local supplies. That's fine, but we don't need to be subsidizing what are now admittedly uncompetitive small producers, small cook inlet producers. We don't need to be subsidizing them to provide additional supplies to the state. Everybody says energy costs are one of the most important things about maintaining the economy of Alaska. We need to maintain low energy costs. Well, now you're talking about energy costs that would exceed the LNG costs to try to bring on these additional Cook Inlet supplies. It's government intervention run amok. It's the equivalent, Michael, of Governor Hammond's barley project. It's the equivalent of saying we're going to throw enough government money at a project so that we're going to be able to grow barley in Alaska and make it competitive in the lower 48, because we want to have a barley. We want to grow barley up here. We think we can grow it. We want to grow it up here. So we're going to have a government project to throw money at it. Well, there's no difference between that and what we're now talking about in terms of the Cook Inlet. We just want to throw additional money at it because, by gosh, we want Alaska grown natural gas as opposed to, for the marginal source, as opposed to LNG. We ought to focus on the economics, like you and I have been talking about since the beginning. We ought to focus on the economics. What's the cheapest source of energy to Alaskans now that we're facing the
Right.
situation in the Cook Inlet? What's the cheapest alternative to Alaskans? And it turns out now even the small Alaska producers are admitting it's LNG.
Right. Well, that's what kills me on this, because even Nat Hers mentions that. He says, but the utilities have not announced. He says, many Alaska lawmakers who pride themselves on the state's petroleum producing heritage hate the idea of imports and the substantial price increases expected to come with them, and have been agitating for more local production. They hate the ideas of imports because they pride themselves on the state's petroleum production heritage. That's the thing. It's an emotional tie. If it doesn't make sense financially, then you move on to the next financially most sound financial making sense. I mean, that's what seems to be here, but everybody wants to avoid that and never looking at the downstream or the overall costs. Oh, we'll just do the royalties. Well, what's the cost? Well, it doesn't matter, because then it'll be Alaska gas and we'll all feel good about burning Alaska gas, and we can feel warm and fuzzy about it because we didn't get it from somebody else. But that's not the question. Is how much does it cost? That's the problem. And like you said, they're all now admitting that LNG imports is the cheaper short-term and maybe long-term solution.
Yeah. And that same comment you just read focused on cost, right? We want the legislators want to keep Alaska gas because they're concerned about cost. Well, from a standpoint of cost, LNG is cheaper all in. I mean, what the legislators want to do, what some want to do, is say, just look at the price. Don't focus on anything else. Just look at the price that NSTAR is going to enter into with these producers, and that price may be below the LNG price, but you have to add in the subsidy that's being created by taking money out of the PFD, the subsidy that's being created by foregoing the revenue, the royalty revenue that the state's entitled to. You have to add that in, and when you add that in, the all-in cost. I mean, what essentially these producers are admitting, the all-in cost is going to be above the LNG price. So if you're concerned about cost, if that's set everything else aside, if you're concerned about cost, as we should be in Alaska because energy costs are high, if you're concerned about cost, you should be going with LNG because that's the lower cost option. That's what the utility analysis told us last year that you and I have been through numerous times on the show. That's what these producers are now admitting continues to be the case, that the LNG cost is cheaper, that they can't compete with the LNG price. They can't make their economics work when they match the LNG price minus a penny. They can't make their economics work. They need a government subsidy in addition to that high price to make them work, a government subsidy that's paid for out of additional PFD cuts. So it's we need to focus on the economics. I mean, this goes back to a discussion you and I had a long time ago, but we need to focus the economics. What's the cheapest alternative? And now even the small producers are admitting the cheapest alternative is LNG.
I thought it was interesting that in there he mentions the fact that a couple of the legislators filed a letter asking if they were here we go. This made Hillcorp a target. In a formal letter to the FTC this month, 2 Anchorage state senators asked the agency to investigate what they call, quote, illegal anti-competitive practices by the company, unquote, and actions by Hillcorp that they said created a scarcity of supply. That's the other question that I have on this, because is this a fake crisis, Brad? I mean, is this with the complicity of NSTAR or whoever else? I mean, is it real? Because I've gotten emails from people who said I've worked in the gas fields, and I know that they have fields that are capped and all this other kind of stuff, and it raises a lot of questions. Obviously, I hadn't heard that anybody had filed a letter, but apparently it's the deal. Here they are. Is it creating a scarcity on purpose?
Yeah, Hillcorp is benefiting from this scarcity. I mean, recall when Wielechowski and Kathy Giesel tried to close the Hillcorp loophole, tried to close the Hillcorp $100 million loophole last legislature. And then Hillcorp wrote a letter essentially threatening their investments in Cook Inlet if the legislators did that. So Hillcorp is benefiting from this situation. They also may benefit, frankly, when their contracts are up in terms of higher price because they created a lower supply situation. At the time that Hillcorp came in, first acquired Chevron, formerly Unical's Cook Inlet supplies, and then acquired Marathon supplies. Unical and Marathon at the time were the top 2 suppliers in the state, top 2 producers in the Cook Inlet. And at the time that Hillcorp acquired Marathon after acquiring Chevron, at the time that Hillcorp acquired Marathon, the FTC came in, reviewed the merger, said that there was a potential for anti-competitive conduct, and had Hillcorp entered into an agreement with Hillcorp under which Hillcorp agreed to continue to explore for and develop additional gas supplies. What Wielechowski and Giesel are saying in the letter is that Hillcorp's not living up to that obligation.
Right. Okay. I'm sorry, Brad. We got to go here. We're up against the break. Thanks for coming on board, folks. We're out of time. Hour 2 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll pick this up in Hour 2. Sorry, Brad. We're up against the break there. I didn't give you the 2-minute warning. My bad. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously, like I said, I've gotten some emails from people that, of course, I can't go out and verify whether they were really employed, but they're telling stories about how some of this stuff is being capped off, and this is, in their view, intentional because it helps them maximize they keep the pressure on, and that way they can maximize their profits under the current scheme. And like you said, when they go back to renegotiate for new contracts, they can get even more. I mean, that's part of the problem here.
Yeah, they've sent a letter to the FTC. Whether the FTC does anything on the basis of 2 Alaska senators sending them a letter. I mean, the Alaska government officially the Attorney General isn't asking for an investigation by the FTC. It's not even a resolution from the full Senate. It's certainly not a resolution from the full legislature asking for the investigation. So whether the FTC, opens a docket on the basis of a letter from 2 of 20 Alaska senators is, we'll see. But I wouldn't hold my breath for the FTC to right. Make that a priority. But it is. I mean, Hillcorp is getting an advantage, even if they haven't renegotiated higher prices. And they did get some higher prices during the shortage we had last winter. But even if they aren't getting higher prices, they are being able to use it as leverage, like they did this last legislature on the $100 million. They got a $100 million return basically on this shortage that's going on in the Cook Inlet by being able to deflect Giesel and Wielechowski and others from pressing forward on closing the Hillcorp loophole. So they are getting a benefit of it. But the point is we shouldn't be subsidizing producers in the Cook Inlet. We now have the marginal source of supply set at LNG. That's the target. That's the bogey, the price bogey, if you will. If you come in a penny below that, then it's better to buy that from a producer who's coming in a penny below the LNG price than the LNG price. That's the bogey. And we're having producers saying, I can't even compete against that. I need a subsidy on top of that, and on top of that higher price to entice me to produce. So as the utility study told us last summer, not this summer, last summer, as utility studies told us last summer, LNG, as expensive as some people believe it is still the cheapest source of additional supply of gas into the Cook Inlet, and we ought to just go forward with that and stop trying to think about subsidizing others to come in and fill that hole.
You just reminded me. Did we ever see that second report that NSTAR
No.
was supposed to be putting out? Right?
No.
I mean, they had a report that said LNG was the way to go, but don't worry, we're looking deeper into that. We're going to have another report, and that was supposed to be out February or March or something, and here we are in September, and we still haven't seen it. We never did see that second report.
No, we never have. It may show up yet in some of the proceedings in the proceedings that Chugach may kick off or NSTAR may kick off as they go down the road on LNG. We may see it yet then, but we haven't seen it. And so all we've got, and they know that all we've got is last summer's report that says that LNG of the bad options are all bad because they're all high priced. But of the
Right.
bad options, LNG is the lowest price of those bad options, lower than additional Cook Inlet supplies. And now the producers in Cook Inlet are proving that correct by saying we need subsidies, even though we know the competitive price is LNG. We need subsidies on top of that to be able to produce.
Again, for an emotional response. I mean, I'm all for burning Alaska gas. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for using Alaska oil and using Alaska gas. But the problem is that if it's not economical, and we could all be proud about being freezing to death in the dark because we can't afford the gas, right? I mean, that's part of the problem. It's the whole argument about Alaska crude being turned into gasoline when we used to do it ourselves. Now we ship it down to Cherry Creek or Cherry Point down there in Washington and have it shipped back as gasoline because we couldn't afford to do it ourselves. I mean, do you want to pay $7 a gallon for gas, or do you want to pay $4 a gallon for gas? I mean, that's kind of the question.
It is the question, Michael, and it's an important question. I mean, energy prices are already high up here. Do we want to add on additional costs by throwing subsidies after non-competitive projects? Do we want to grow barley up here? I mean, this is the perfect analogy. Do we want to grow barley up here by just throwing a bunch of government money at it? Because we've got the climate conditions that can grow barley. Do we want to throw a bunch of money and grow barley, and even though it's not non-competitive in the market, do we want to do that because we just want a barley industry? Well, that's exactly that's exactly the same thing we're talking about in the Cook Inlet. Do we want to throw a bunch of government money in terms of repealed incentive or repealed obligations? Do we want to throw a bunch of money at these producers just to continue to have Alaska gas? No. We should go for what makes the most economic sense.
40 seconds here, Brad. Final thoughts for today. What people just tuning into the show for the first time, they're like, what is going on? What's your final thoughts?
My final thoughts go back to the first two segments. We've got candidates out there who are sycophants for oil, who are saying we need to protect oil, even though we're giving super profits, we're giving extra money to oil. We need to continue those to oil. No, we don't need to do that. On the other extreme, progressives are saying we need to spend money, even if we take it from the very people we're trying to protect. Even if we increase poverty levels in this state, we need to spend that money because we have people in poverty. And so we need to create more poverty because we need to spend money to. It's just we've got craziness on both sides of the spectrum. We need to find a way. We need to find a way to get toward the middle, both on oil revenues and on the balance of government spending versus revenues.
Brad, thank you so much. Enjoy yourself, my friend. Thanks for coming on board as usual.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming on board. All right, folks, that's it for hour one. We're on to hour two, the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to hour two of the fastest 2 hours in radio. Every morning, right here from 6 to 8 a.m., we try to keep you informed. What did I used to say? Educated, entertained, and enlightened. That's what we try to do each and every day here on the program, looking for ways to keep you in the loop, as it were, on things that are happening here in the state of Alaska. And that's where we focus, is on Alaskan stuff, because I feel like that's where we can make a difference. That's where we can make a difference in talking about these things. And I'm hoping that people are listening. Let's just put it that way. I'm hoping that people are listening and making sound decisions, especially as we come into this new election cycle, and that we're listening to what our potential elected leaders are saying. I hope we're doing that. I really, really do. We just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and had a good conversation with Brad about the three big topics there. If you missed it, you can go back and listen to it on the podcast, which you could find on Spotify or wherever you find podcasts, or you can go back and watch it. You can watch it on the replay on Facebook, YouTube, or Rumble. Just feel free to go back there and discuss those things. So let's pick these. I want to do a little bit of Chris Story's coming up here in a few minutes. We're going to take him a little early this morning because he has other things going on. So he's not going to be in the last segment. He's going to be in the second segment of the show today. But I want to go back and touch on what Brad has been talking about, and especially that last topic about the subsidies. And talking about how these different private industries are coming to the state hat in hand to say, we need the subsidies or we can't produce. To say that I'm a little leery of the crisis is to say that say I'm a little heavy, right? I mean, I'm a little concerned about the way that this whole crisis of gas has come about over the course of the last couple of years, and how we're seeing the squeeze being put on by NSTAR and others, as well as Hillcorp and kind of the actions of Hillcorp and Hex and Blue Crest and some of these other companies, where they basically are saying it almost feels like we're being held hostage, right? In a way. It almost feels like we're being held hostage. And one of those, in this story by Nat Hers from the Northern Journal, which you can find over at the ADN, adn.com. I guess I'll post a link up to this in the chat room so you folks can actually read this article yourself and take a look at it. But I got to post it on Rumble too as well. Here's the good morning. One of the key parts of this story is one of the subheadings talks about how I'm going to assume all the risk. And this is from the folks who are down at Hex, right? This is John Hendricks at Hex. He said, I'm going to drill on my own. I'm going to assume all the risk. We've got to make sure that we have a return. That's why he's going to the government hat in hand to say he needs to have those royalties zeroed out, because he doesn't want to assume all the risk. Which, I mean, in a perfect world, as a business owner, as an investor, as an entrepreneur, you do assume all the risk usually. Now, unless you can get some kind of sweet deal where you get a contract right away that, the government or somebody else, but even that is not 100% risk free. I mean, that's the definition of the free market and entrepreneurism is, yes, you do assume all the risk, but you also reap all the rewards on the other side. So if the risk pays off, you get it big, right? That's the whole thing. You make it big on the other side. But of course, it's much juicier if you can get the government to assume part of the risk or the majority of the risk, and you still make it on the other side. I mean, that's even better. But is that really what we want? And it really kills me. This, again, like I said, even Nat Hurst picking up on the idea that somehow Alaska policymakers, lawmakers, they hate the idea of imports. Why? Pride in themselves on the state's petroleum producing heritage. It's an emotional response. As I said earlier, I mean, when we were talking about gasoline, back when there was a refinery in North Pole, that when the North Pole refinery actually did produce gasoline at the time, this is back in the day, right? There was always this argument about, we need Alaska gasoline because, it's Alaska's oil and we should, which is all well and good until that terminal shut down. And then you only had the one down in the peninsula that was making gasoline. And then it's like, well, but the costs and the thing and and then of course it became cheaper to send the crude out from Valdez, send it down south. They'd crack it down and make gasoline out of it in Washington, Cherry Creek, Cherry Point, and then they would send it back. And when it became cheaper to do that than it does to produce it in your own state, there was a little grumbling, but nobody was, because the question is, would you rather pay, $7 a gallon, $7 a gallon for gas that was, crude that was pumped in Alaska? It's Alaska gasoline. And would you rather do that at $6 or $7 a gallon? Or would you rather take Cherry Creek gas for $4 a gallon? Right? As somebody who drives a lot, obviously I'm looking for the cheaper alternative. I'm not so emotionally wed to the idea of burning my own natural resource that I'm willing to, increase my cost to use it by 50 or 100%. But that seems to be the argument. And the other argument that I'm hearing a lot over this whole thing about LNG is that, they could leave us stranded. They could refuse to ship us gas. When has that really, I mean, with the exception of the Russian conflict, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, and some of the problems there where they did cut off part of Western Europe, Russia was still pumping gas out to Western Europe, even when they were basically, at odds with each other over everything else. It was only when war broke out that they kind of stopped. And even then they had the Nord Stream pipeline, right? I mean, there were still things that were going on. Are you really saying that somehow somebody's going to get a bee in their bonnet and they're going to shut us down? I mean, first of all, we would have storage, right? That's part of the whole thing with LNG is that you bring a whole tanker load in, you store it, yada, yada, yada. So we would have some latitude there. We would have some buffer or cushion. But do you really, and I've heard this from so somebody's saying something, because I'm hearing this from several different people, including people I respect, who are like, oh, well, they could just cut us off. Show me anywhere in the world where a government or a major, a major place was just cut off because somebody didn't like the cut of their jib. Just show me. Show me where that is. It seems like it's more of a boogeyman comment than anything else. Well, they could cut us off. Well, hell, they could cut us off from food. They could cut us off from gasoline. They could cut us off from, how many places could they cut us off from at this point? Because we are here at the end of the supply chain, right? We all know that, right? As far as the logistical chain, we are at the very end of the chain. It doesn't really go anywhere from here. So, sure, they could cut us off from toilet paper and food and gasoline and everything else, but it just keeps flowing. It just keeps flowing. So even that argument, I'm trying, again, I've asked, who is they? Who is they? They're making money, right? And whoever they are, they're selling it at a profit. So do they just stop making a profit because, they didn't, like I said, we do something that makes them angry? Alaska does something that makes them angry, or America does something that makes them angry? Or do they still like taking those green American dollars? So it kind of blows my mind that we are so trapped in this whole idea of, well, we're a resource state and we should do nothing but burn our own resources. I would love that. I really would. But does it make fiscal sense? Does it make financial sense? It's not going anywhere. If we don't burn Alaska gas, it's still there. And so if the market comes back, or the market, if the supply starts to shrink, then guess what? Maybe the metrics of this work out one day. Maybe the metrics of Alaska gas down the road look great. Maybe you can just, maybe one day it will all work out. It's not going anywhere. You could land bank this stuff up. You could hold on to it for a period of time. But it's just this whole argument of we have to burn Alaska gas, and it's a they thing and everything else. It blows my mind. It blows my mind. That this is where we're at on this. And we're refusing to look at, even though, as Brad says, they're all pointing out that LNG is the more financially viable, and I say short term, I want to say short term, is the only viable short-term 10-year window thing right now, unless we subsidize and give a bunch of money to companies and subsidize even in the terms of, we're not giving them cash, we're just canceling the royalty, but that's income that has to be made up somewhere else. That's the other thing. This goes back to like Julie Colombe's, child care tax credit thing. Well, it really doesn't cost us anything because we just gave them a break on their taxes. And so, well, then that's revenue that didn't come in. So somewhere on that balance sheet, the money's got to be made up for somewhere. And what does that mean? Oh, yeah. It means that we'll then have to pay more out of our permanent fund to pay for government for monies that would have come from somewhere else. Okay. But don't, they're going to shut us off. They're going to shut us off. That's not what Costco says. Costco's got the, again, if they were going to shut us off, they could do this in a variety of ways. And it doesn't have to be with gas. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show continues. Chris Story is going to be joining us in just a hot second. We'll be back. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We return in just a moment.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, let's get Mr. Story on the line here. Let's get Mr. Story on the line. See if we can get him ready to rock and roll. Hey, look at that! It worked.
Fantastic. I knew it would.
I'm so pleased when it works on the first go around. You know, it just
pleased and proud.
That's right. Makes me happy. How are you, Mr. Story? What's going on with you? What be the haps? How was your weekend?
So it sounds like a barrage of questions. You're triggering my spectrum. Great. Had a great weekend. I don't know the difference, Michael. It's all the same to me, a weekend, a weekday. I enjoy each of them equally. That sounds rude, doesn't it?
Well, it sounded kind of conceited, but I'll let it go a little bit.
I actually tried to be more mysteriously vague. I sent a picture to my daughters over the weekend. I have these ball caps that I've had created that have the acronym BYM, because Backyard Millionaire just on its own, BM, not really good. Backyard Millionaire. So I call it BYM just to differentiate between the two topics. Anyway, and so I worked all weekend. So on different properties, several different properties, just really needed some attention. And so I worked all weekend, and I threw my hat up on my shelf in our closet. I've got my own shelf, and I threw my hat up there on top of a couple of pistols, and I noticed that the hat was really sweat stained, and I just worked up a sweat, and I took a picture of it, and you can see the butts of the pistols and the the leather ammo belt, and then this hat that's sweat stained, and it says BYM, and I said, that's what America is built on. I sent that to my girls. They didn't reply, but I thought it was a really poignant picture anyway, because it's hard work and leverage. Of course, the weapons being leverage.
Yeah.
Not when you're taking care of your property. I'm just saying it's.
Yeah.
This isn't even Firearms Friday. I don't know why.
I know, really. You're just going on and on about that. I will tell you that I got, I had a good weekend myself. I finished editing up Chris's book, The Millionaire Maker. And
good job, by the way.
Every time I go back through that, I get a little bit more out of it, and it's really good to hear that. So yeah, The Backyard Millionaire. If you guys haven't gone out and got your copy of The Backyard Millionaire yet, I recommend you do. Just go to ilovehomeralaska.com, and Chris has got all the links over there. You could find it on Amazon and Audible too, if you want the spoken version of it. I did it all like it was NPR. This is NPR.
It's really good. And I met a guy last week. He's a big banker out of state. Anyway, he had gone to my website before this meeting, and he had looked some stuff up, and he had downloaded and purchased the Audible version of Backyard Millionaire. And he goes, he said, you do radio? I'm surprised you didn't do the Audible version yourself. And I said, well, have you listened to it yet? And he goes, no, I'm going to on my morning walks this coming week. And I said, okay, when you're done listening to it, you're going to go, oh, now I know why Chris didn't do it himself. People mistake the idea of being able to speak or speaking on radio with acting. You have this gift of being able to act when you do voiceovers, and I don't. And I readily admit it. It's like, no, Michael's the man, quite literally Jacob Man, but also these other books and The Millionaire Maker. You did a superb job. I listened to it over the weekend before I submitted it to Audible, and it's fantastic. I was enthralled. I loved it.
Oh, good. Wow. Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. But yeah, I mean, it's always good. I love getting if The Backyard Millionaire is the kind of the backstory, right? It's like the origin story, and it's kind of the parable of what you can do. Then The Millionaire Maker is the battle plan, right? It's the yardstick on how to apply that parable in your life. And I think they go well together. Just buy them both. Just do it. Buy them both. Go out and check it out, and you will enjoy it. The samples are up as well. So Anyway, well, we're coming up on it right now. We're gonna keep going. What's the story today, Chris? What's the topic? Quickly.
6 rules for unstoppable success.
6 rules, unstoppable success. Let's get into it. Chris Story, our guest, the Michael Duke Show. Please like and share no matter where you are. Subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Oh, yeah, buddy. Brad Keithley just finished up with us, and now you know it's Tuesday, and that means Chris Story. Normally, he's in with the second segment with us today, or the third segment. But today he's in with the second segment because he's a busy man. He's got stuff to do. He's like, I could come on next week or sometime in the future. No, just come on early. We'll make it happen. I do it. So Chris is coming on board with us today. Now, if you don't know Chris, he is kind of like the positivity guru. He's a realtor by trade. He's a property investor. He's a potter. He makes pots, not the other kind. And, of course, he's a radio show host, and you can find him on Tuesdays and Thursdays on KPEN down in the peninsula, and you can find his podcast over at ilovehomeralaska.com. Today, he's going to talk about the 6 steps to be unstoppable, and he joins us right now. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning, Michael. You turned me. Oh, I'm going to make this sentence go real fast because I don't want to confuse anybody.
Right.
You turned me on to Orson Swett Martin.
Okay.
And so I didn't want to stop with you turned me on because that's
right
inappropriate. But what you turned me on to Orson Swett Martin's work, and I'd never heard of him, and I'm embarrassed to say that, but he's the literal, I guess he's probably America's first self-help author or first the person to take a deep dive into the stuff that you and I talk about every single week. So anyway, I picked up his an incredible copy of one of his first books, a masterwork called Pushing to the Front. And the cool thing is it was a first edition that I found, and it was inscribed by a mother to her 2 sons in 1929. I thought, man, that is just the coolest thing. But point is, he said, and I want to quote him real quick, so let me make sure I'm okay. I want to get this quote exactly right. He said, "Success is not measured by what you accomplish, but by the opposition you've encountered and the courage with which you have maintained the struggle against overwhelming odds." I like that. I love that quote because we often confuse success with picking the winning lottery ticket and or getting the winning the genetic lottery or the life's lottery to be in the perfect place at the right time and it's lucky, or you come up with a once in a generation idea and turn it into Facebook, or you turn it into some other kind of company. And we all look at that as a unicorn. But the reality is success is what we all accomplish when we do face opposition. We encounter opposition and we push through, because every good story has to have an antagonist, not just a protagonist,
right?
But an antagonist. If it was nothing but protagonist, it'd be boring,
right?
But antagonists.
It's always got to be a struggle. It's always got to be the struggle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what people identify with is the struggle.
Yes, exactly. So this morning I was journaling, and I just wrote down unstoppable success. I don't know why, and I thought, well, we love lists. Human beings love lists. And as Guy Kawasaki said in several of his presentations, he goes, "I'm going to tell you that I've got 6 things or 10 things or 8 things, whatever, because if you think this sucks, you'll at least know where we're at in this spectrum of it sucking. You'll know it's almost over." So I'm going to give you 6 rules for unstoppable success. And the first one, coincidentally, is also the first step in the Millionaire Maker, is to decide. It's one of the most fundamental and foundational things we can do to determine our own success and become unstoppable, is to decide or to fully commit to something. And when decide comes from the Latin of decidere, which means to cut off from any other options. There's no other possibility but success. If you determine to decide and commit 110% to a thing, you'll accomplish it. But you got to decide. Nobody else can decide for you.
Decidere, right? The to cut off.
Yes.
That's right.
Like no other options. Like, and not to make this a shameless promotion for the Millionaire Maker, but I did just listen back to your Audible version you did for me. And I was just listening to that story about my friend John Calhoun, who was helping me work on my Argo. And it was just such a stark contrast between the two of us, because the protagonist of me, a mechanic, is a joke. The mechanics themselves are the antagonists, and I'm easily thwarted when it comes to turning wrenches. Like, I can't do it. And my friend just almost threw down his wrenches and said, fine, then leave. If you're not committed, leave my shop. And I'm like, okay. And we did it. And like 30 minutes later, we got it moving. So it's just, I hadn't decided, he had. As Les Brown said, at breakfast, the chicken was involved, but the pig was committed.
Right. Exactly. Make that decision for sure. All right. So number 1 is decide.
Number 2, learn on the fly. So you got to leap. And once you leap, you need an aiming point, and that's what you've decided upon. And then you just have to leap. You've said it many times, you quoted Zig Ziglar about not getting baked in the squat. You cannot get into the paralysis of analysis such that you just don't ever leap, and you sit there at the edge of the diving board while everybody else around you is doing their Greg Louganis. You've got to leap. You know where you're going to aim because you already decided on that. How are you going to get there? Well, you might have a framework at least of what you anticipate doing or happening once you leap, but then you've got to leap. Do not spend too much time thinking about every step between you and that aiming point, because as Price Pritchett says, you'll never leap if you have to have every detail worked out. A lot of times you're going to be off course in that leap, but you remember, you already know where you're aiming towards, and how you get there is going to be determined if you learn on the fly. So get in the air, take a leap, have faith, back it by faith, and best practices. You can learn on the fly, though. You don't need to learn everything before you jump.
Right. It's almost like a leap of faith, right? I mean, at that point, you know where you're going, you know
Faith's
what the framework
involved.
is, but you got to take that leap.
And happy accidents come along the way. Things that have happened to me in my life is I'm aiming towards something. I get a little bit veered off course, completely unexpected, a wind of change that I didn't anticipate, and I end up somewhere even better. Not always. Sometimes you end up in the water, unless you're aiming for the water. It's not a good thing. But you take some of these changes in stride. And again, that's becoming unstoppable, is dealing with it. Imagine that Captain Sully just said, oh, forget it. I don't know. This probably won't work. No, he landed on the Hudson because he took a leap of faith, and he had a lot of muscle memory, of course, and skill to do such a thing. But you can do the same. Learn on the fly. Number 3, as we go down our 6 rules for unstoppable success, is to build a team of people, a tribe. Usually behind any successful person in any walk of life is a team, is a tribe of people behind them. Of course, we know that marriage is an incredible place to look for that partnership, and then building support beyond it. My cousin's running for mayor, Jim Anderson. He's running for mayor of Homer. I'm sure he's going to win. And he's got a team of people already assembled around him. And he sent out a message this morning, bouncing some ideas off of his team. And once he wins and he becomes mayor of Homer, we're all going to remember that we helped get you there, buddy. And he's going to be the first to admit it. So you've got to build a team of people around you as you go down this journey.
Yeah, no, I mean, this comes back to, it's kind of an amalgamation of all these other, sayings and metaphors and everything. It's not what you know, it's who you know. You are the amalgamation of the 5 people that you were around and the books you read in 5 years, and all these kind of things. It all comes back to, kind of that idea that Hill talked about, going back to the Millionaire Maker, talking about the mastermind. It's, who do you know, and who, that those 2 minds coming together for a singular purpose create an even greater mind on top of that. And you need that. Absolutely. You can't make it without that.
Bought a business a few years ago, and Tiffany and I did, and we faced each and every one of these decisions. First off, the decision, then we had to learn on the fly. We had built a team already, and we were able to engage that team as we went. And the 4th skill, the 4th rule for unstoppable success is, and this harkens right back to my original parable, the Backyard Millionaire: inventory your skills. identify what you've already accomplished, what you've got already in your hutch of knowledge or your skill base. The relationships is part of that as you take your inventory. And I suggest you literally write it down and sit down with a blank piece of paper and just begin from, and it sounds silly, but from childhood. What have you learned along the way to include reading? There was a reel on YouTube I saw the other day where Pete Davidson of SNL, who's moderately not funny, and he was talking about how he doesn't think Donald Trump can read. He doesn't think he really has the ability to read because of his experience at the table, quote, read at SNL. And Trump would say, well, I'd rather say it this way. It's like, well, he mistook his ability to read and his ability to also read the audience and see what he would rather do. Anyway, point is, put reading down, reading, writing. Even in the book, I talk about, August, write down tiny shoes, even the simplest little things. And as you build towards the skill of, maybe you're a master negotiator, or you have the ability to you have a commercial driver's license, whatever it is, you put these skills down on paper and then begin to trust yourself that you've got a great deal of talent already. You've got a lot of gifts and talents on board. You need more. Obviously, you're going to need to hone some of those skills, but you've got a lot more going for you than against you. I promise you that.
All right. We're working towards number 6. What do we got next? 5?
See, it's almost over. Yeah. Number 5, choose your circles wisely. There are people in your life by proximity that you don't have any control over. You'll work with them. They're related to whatever it is, but they may be negative. They may be second guessing your every move. You might find yourself reticent to actually share your next steps in front of some of these people that are in a close circle to you by proximity. That's good. You should only share your hopes and dreams with people that you know are in your circle of support, that will support you and help propel you. I don't just mean an echo chamber. I mean people that will help challenge you, and with the idea, rather than to cut you down, but to help you go up further. And those are the kind of people that you want in your circle, that are going to be not just against cheerleaders on the sideline, but literally maybe in a scrum, helping you figure out your next move. And you might, reciprocity works. You maybe are able to help them as well. So carefully manage your circles, both by choice and by proximity, and only share your hopes and dreams with the people that you know are going to be there to support you. And number 6, the 6th rule for unstoppable success, according to me, would be practice patience. It takes time. Everything you wish to do or accomplish does take time. And sometimes we get in a hurry, especially in this digital age. I mean, I'm sitting here helping. I was drafting something using Dolly or whatever through ChatGPT, and I'm waiting for this image to present itself to me. And I'm like, come on already. It's been 10 seconds.
Right.
And so we live in that digital age where that little spinning circle can just drive us insane. And when it comes to our success, it comes to either wealth or health or prosperity, relationships, everything takes time, practice, patience.
Yeah. I want to go back to number 5 real quick. We got a couple minutes here. You were talking about the circle. And one thing that we don't like to talk about is because we love our families. We love our parents, our siblings, our, aunts, uncles, relatives, the whole thing. But unfortunately, sometimes those people who are closest to us, who've seen us pick our nose or who changed our diaper when we were young, sometimes they have a hard time getting out of that mindset and seeing the potential in us that others may see. And so sometimes that circle that you talk about, the circle of influence, the sphere of influence, the friends, the people you want to share your deepest dreams or aspirations with, sometimes those aren't the people that you want to share it with, your family, I mean, because they love you. I'm not saying they don't love you, but they may not be the most positive of people around you because, again, they've seen you at your worst. And so that's coloring
not
what
just
they
that.
got.
I agree with you. Exactly. Not just that they've seen you at your worst, but they care about you probably more than anybody else on the planet. And as such, they understand that risk is involved in what you want to do, and they want to protect you from the downside. They want to protect you from failure, protect you from falling or getting hurt. And so we'll stop our children from running with scissors because we love them. And so that's what I think we can't help but see sometimes with family is, I don't know. Let me tell you 5 reasons why that might not work. Maybe you should stay where you are. That's
Right.
love, and they have the best of intentions. The other piece of it is sometimes it's on you. you play the role. You play the fool. You can't help but play the one who is shy or bashful. And we begin to play that role. And if you don't escape from the gravitational pull of that role, once you get around certain people, if you go to your high school reunion, you start playing the class clown again versus the surgeon you've become or the radio talk show host you become, whatever, then suddenly you're just back into that same old routine and role. So it's on you also to become someone new. But again, yeah, I agree 100%. Don't share your hopes and dreams. Don't count your money over an open sewer, as they say.
I like that one for sure. Except for Uncle Mel. That guy, he just hates you anyway. So, some of them love you, but some of them are just going to be mean to be mean. But again, the 6 steps of becoming unstoppable. And I think, each and every one, if we just take those steps a piece at a time, we can be there. And by the way, Chris Story, as I just mentioned, has got his new book out. It is the companion piece to The Backyard Millionaire, which you should already have a copy of if you've listened to this show, because it's amazing. Either the printed copy or the Audible copy, which is narrated by yours truly. And now he's got the companion piece in the bag, and I imagine that's probably going to be up on Audible here in the near future, as well as available for purchase. It's not big. It's 35, 40 pages. It's not a huge thing, but small, what big things come in little packages sometimes. And that is the blueprint for what the story of the Backyard Millionaire Maker lines out as a parable. That's the blueprint to put that into practice. And you should go check those out for sure. And can they get those now basically at ilovehomeralaska.com, Chris?
You bet, under the books tab. It's right there. And I recommend getting the hardcover copy of The Millionaire Maker, and then Audible, it should be posted within probably 24 to 48 hours. We should have that up and running as well. And it's worth listening to while you're on a walk.
All right. And listening to it over and over and over again, because it's got lots of good stuff. I mean, I've listened to it probably a dozen times in the edit, and I get more every time I listen. Chris Story, the man from Homer. Hold the line for a second, folks. We're out of time. We got one more segment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right. Just wanted to grab one final bite with Chris Story before we go anywhere. One final bite at the apple. Anything else, Chris? Is that it for today? Is there anything else you wanted to share with us? Words of wisdom, pearls of great price. What do you want to hit us with?
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, what's funny is when you and I first got on, it was all fogged in. I couldn't even see anything. And now I can see the bay and the mountains and a clear blue sky. So I think that's probably metaphoric for today and the rest of your week. It's just going to get nothing but better blue skies and sunshine.
That's
and
right.
Rainbows and puppies.
Hey, sometimes it's a little foggy and you can't quite see your way, and then it clears up, and now I can see clearly now. The rain is gone. So, all right.
I would say for your hardcore Facebook followers that are still listening, I would just say I'm happy to share a free copy of the Millionaire Maker in a PDF. It's just an ebook. I'm happy to share that for absolutely free for anybody who wants it. Just text your email and the word maker at 907-299-7653, and I'll reply with a PDF, a digital version of the book. And of course, you're still obligated to go and leave a review if you like it or don't like it, and then also get the Audible version so you hear Michael Duke tell it to you. But I'll give you a free ebook right now.
So just text the word millionaire to 299-7653, and
sounds good.
with your email, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep, and I'll email it to you.
All right. Well, I posted that link up into the chat room, and folks can text you and get it all squared away. I'd love more people to read it. That's for sure. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate you coming on board. Have a good rest of your week.
All right. Y'all too. Bye-bye.
Chris Story, the man from Homer, joining us this morning on the program. Okay. I mean, I got things to say here. I know that Randy has been desperately trying to get somebody to quote to him what an actual official government tax is. And here's the problem, Randy. You keep splitting hairs. You keep splitting hairs down to because Brad says it's a tax, and then you're going to try and take this one point and say, is it an official tax? Is it a real tax? Is it a I don't know. When Matt Berman, the economist, gets on and writes an article for the ADN and says the PFD cut is a tax, I pretty much take that as, okay. I mean, he agrees because that's what we've been calling it for a long time. So I know you're stuck on this. I know you can't get over it. And it's your one hair that you'd like to split down with a micrometer, but it doesn't work that way. And Henry, I am seeing your comments, dude. It's just, we've talked about a lot of the things that you're mentioning here. For folks who are listening on the podcast, he's going on and on about invasion of America and biological weapons and all this other kind of stuff. Yes, we've talked about it. We've talked about it a lot over the years. But I'm not going to focus all of my energy on it because there's only certain things that I can do. And I've decided that this is the direction that I can do. This is the difference that I can make. The difference that I can make is right here. So I'm doing what I can do. That's what I can do. So I'm not blocking you, Henry. If you're getting moderated, it's by the Facebook auto moderator. It's not by me. So, but do you, and keep doing. I personally think that what Chris is talking about and what we're having Chris on is good. I don't think it's a total failure. That's what Henry said. He said it's a total failure. You're talking about something that's a total failure. No, I think we're talking about making people better. And I think we should focus on that no matter what. Always trying to uplift and make people better. Okay. What else we got in here? What else have we got in here today? I'm scrolling backwards to see if there's any other comments here that I need to comment on. Oh yeah, the Sitka outage, the internet outage. Oof, that's tough in there. I saw something from Layla. Where is it? Layla talked about the they. Here we go. Some of us, that's a big long thing. Some of us feel nasty if the U.S. government is an occupying force in Alaska and that they, the government, could decide that Alaska should be depopulated and order the oil companies to stop shipping here. Yes, they could do it with gasoline, food, etc. You were still a kid when Carter locked up the D2 lands and all the investment in Alaska evaporated. That shows us how precarious trusting the federal government can be. For some of us, depending on the lower 48 for anything seems risky, and I can't see the rest of the comment because it's there. But, Lila, you're right. I mean, there could be things like that could happen, although we wouldn't be dealing with the they of the federal government. We'd be dealing with the they of whoever the LNG supplier is. I mean, I'd almost be more willing to deal with a company that's looking out for their bottom line and profits than I would for a government who doesn't care about profits and doesn't have to, would rather be about control for them. So it's just one of those things. One of those things. All right, let's continue the Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do this thing.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
All right. And welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Duke Show. Tuesday edition of the show. Ready to go. We hope you had a great weekend. We hope you were got everything that you wanted to do out there. Beautiful days. Of course, now it's supposed to be, what was I reading this morning? Sorry. New Pacific low arrives on Wednesday. Big rains and gusty winds. Which is just, another way of saying it's fall in Alaska. It is what it is. So enjoy these final days of enjoy these final days of summer and fall as we get into the, because I guess officially, I mean, we're not officially in fall. What is the date for the official transition to fall? But for me, Labor Day is the beginning of fall. Always has been the beginning of fall. And I still got stuff to do. I still got a list as long as your arm of things I need to do around the house to get ready for winter. But it is what it is. It is what it is. What else is happening out on the front out here? What other stories that we need to pick up? I almost don't want to get too negative because I feel pretty good after talking with Chris this morning. That's always the problem with having Chris. I always like to finish the show with Chris because I feel like we leave on a high note and we can walk out with that kind of those thoughts in our heads of how do we make it, how do we become unstoppable? And so I don't want to go too negative. I think it is interesting, though. One of the big things we're going to be facing this fall on the ballot is the question about whether or not we should retain ranked choice voting. And I thought it was interesting that the ADN late last night, no, I guess it was over the weekend, updated 4 hours ago, but over the weekend, they posted a new story about the group that's backing ranked choice voting. That is Alaskans for Better Elections, right? That's the group. And there are others out there who are raising money trying to prevent ranked choice voting from being removed from the ballot. And that they have raised, according to the headline here, $4.5 million in August alone. In August alone. I mean, this is, just from outside donors. Now, that dwarfs all the donations received by the other group, which the repeal group, but they've just raised only $61,000. $61,000 versus $4.5 million of outside money. There's plenty of groups out there. Unite America, a Colorado-based group that is supporting ranked choice voting across the U.S., donated $2.075 million to keep it going on. And they say Alaska, remember, Alaska's a cheap date. If they can keep it on the ballot here, if they can keep it on the books here, then they can do what they've been doing for the last 2 years, which is holding Alaska up and say, look, Alaska has it. They love it. It's crazy. The second largest donor is Act Now Initiative, which is a Texas-based group that supports electoral reform and other progressive causes, and they gave $2 million in August. So $4.5 million between those two groups alone is just the money that they raised in August alone. The No on 2 group, which is the lead group in support of keeping the state's current voting system, reports having raised close to $4.8 million this election cycle. Remember back in 2020 when they put it on the ballot, they spent about $7 million to get the ranked choice voting and the jungle primaries on the thing. Although that's not how they sold it. Remember, it was about a 4-to-1 as far as the ad mix of what they were actually, the messaging that they were putting out there. It was almost 4-to-1 about dark money. That's what it was all about. They wanted you to get rid of dark money. And we'll see what's going on. Julie Lucky, who is the No on 2's campaign manager, declined to comment specifically on the big money donations made to keep ranked choice voting and open primaries in Alaska, but she said the two-party system is entrenched in the U.S. and that it has power and influence without spending money. So she won't comment on that, but it's all about I know. There's a whole bunch of people who've reached out to me over the last few months, some libertarians and others who basically said we should keep ranked choice voting because it's, and again, I'm just not, I know that the two-party dichotomy is painful, guys. I know it is. I just don't think that this is the solution for breaking it. I really don't. Because it's very obvious. On paper, we talked about this last week. On paper, it works perfectly until you take into account the philosophies of the participants. And then you see that it benefits, progressives more than it does individuals or conservatives. That's just kind of how it works out. And it's unfortunate, but that's where it is. So again, you'll be facing that repeal choice in November on the big ballot. So the yes on 2 will be your vote if you want to repeal ranked choice voting. It'll be no if you don't want to repeal ranked choice voting. But if you want to repeal ranked choice voting, you will be voting yes on ballot measure number 2 as it comes up here in this November election. But it's going to be a tough fight. It's a lot of money. A lot, and it's August. That was how much they raised in August, which means if they keep doing that over the next couple months, you thought they were desperate to get it on the ballot. They will be super desperate to keep it, to get it off the ballot and to keep ranked choice voting for sure. And it's interesting that it's going. Meanwhile, other Republicans around the state are looking at ways to continue to try and bypass the whole ranked choice voting thing. And District number 9 has now made that decision as well. 2 Republicans have dropped out, leaving in District 9, which is the Girdwood district. Lee Ellis and Brandy Pennington, who we had on both of them on this program. And they were both, I thought, had some good answers out there for their questions. They have both dropped out of the race, leaving Republican Lucy Bauer alone in the race to face Kai Holland, who's been endorsed by the Alaska Democratic Party. So this will now be a 1-on-1 2-person race. Ellis came away with 870 votes, Pennington 811, and Bauer received 933. And rather than split the donation base, the volunteer base, and all the time and effort, both Ellis and Pennington cleared the runway for Bauer. Now, it's interesting, Ellis, who only recently registered as a Republican, Lee Ellis, has endorsed Holland. Kai Holland, which is interesting because, again, he's a Republican, but now he's endorsing the democratically endorsed candidate. So I don't know how to read that other than Suzanne Downing says that she thought that Ellis was recruited by Zach Fields as a plant in the thing. But I don't know. I just don't know. But it will be a 1-on-1 race. It'll be a 1-on-1 race. So we'll see how this comes down to. If all of Ellis's and Pennington's votes went to Bauer, you're looking at it being an interesting race, to say the least, as to whether or not they'll be able to do anything with that. But anyway, more ranked choice voting stuff and everything. Tomorrow we got more coming up. We've got a school board member from Fairbanks coming in. Somebody else too. I've already forgotten who it was. That's what happens when you don't have it up in front of you. All right, folks. Well, we got to go for today. Thanks for coming on board the Michael Duke Show. Yeah, I've forgotten who it was already. All right. We got to go, my friends. We will see you tomorrow. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. Isn't that dark money? Yes, Michael, that is dark money, right? Yeah, that is dark money. It's crazy. It's crazy. All right, we got to go. Thanks for being part of it. Again, like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. We will see you guys mañana. Have a great one.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.